I remember the night my world collapsed like it was yesterday. The beeping of the heart monitor stopped, and silence swallowed the hospital room. My husband, Aleb, lay lifeless on that cold bed, his skin turning pale. I could not breathe. I wanted to scream, but my voice was buried under the weight of disbelief. Just hours earlier, we were arguing about something small, something so meaningless, and now he was gone. I stared at his body and felt anger boiling inside me. Anger at him for leaving me. Anger at myself for every bitter word I had ever spoken. And anger at God for not stopping this. My knees buckled and I slid to the floor, clutching the sheets. I had prayed before, but in that moment, I felt as though heaven was silent. I asked myself, where was God when I needed him most? And then something happened that would change everything. Before I continue, I want to pause and say thank you to everyone watching this testimony. To my new and returning viewers, I cannot tell you how grateful I am for your presence here. If you have not subscribed yet, I cannot wait for you to hit that subscribe button because it truly fuels and energizes this channel to keep bringing stories like this to you. Please remember to comment, share your thoughts, and engage with this story as we walk through it together. Now, let me take you back to where this all began. My name is Deborah. I am 42 years old and I live in Oklahoma. My husband, Aleb, is 51. We had been married for almost 20 years when this all happened. From the outside, we looked like a strong couple. Steady jobs, a decent home, and 3 grown children who had already left the house. People saw stability, but inside our marriage was a quiet battlefield. Faith was something I treated like a Sunday routine. I showed up to church, smiled, sang hymns, and left without letting the word of God pierce my heart. I carried hidden anger that I never confessed, unforgiveness that I let harden, and questions about God that I never dared speak aloud. I believed in God, yes, but he was distant, like a relative you only call on holidays. My husband was worse. Aleb had grown cold to anything related to God. He was proud, self-made, and often dismissed prayer as a waste of breath. He had been hurt by church years ago, and he never let it go. I remember evenings when he would laugh at preachers on television and say, "They just want your money. God does not care." I stopped arguing with him, but deep inside, it planted doubt in me. It was in September 2021 when things shifted. Aleb had been complaining of chest pain for a week, but he brushed it off saying he was too busy to see a doctor. I had a bad feeling, but he waved it away with his usual stubborn pride. That night, after dinner, he collapsed right there in our living room. I called 911 with trembling hands, my voice cracking as I begged them to come quickly. When the paramedics rushed in, I stood frozen, watching them press on his chest, shouting instructions I could barely hear. My heart raced as if it wanted to tear out of my chest. Then came the words I dreaded. "We have no pulse." I felt the air leave the room. Everything went silent. My husband was gone, or so I thought. When the paramedics said those words, "We have no pulse," I thought my life had ended, but for Aleb, something else had just begun. He later told me that the moment his heart stopped, he felt himself falling. It was not like drifting to sleep. It was violent, like being pulled down a tunnel with invisible chains wrapped around his body. He said the darkness was thicker than anything he had ever seen. It was alive, pressing in on him, smothering him. He tried to scream, but no sound came out. He expected peace, maybe nothingness, but what he saw next shook him to the core. He was standing in a place that burned without light. Shadows moved like smoke, and the air reeked of sulfur and burning flesh. He could hear screaming, thousands of voices, crying, begging, cursing, wailing. It was a sound that clawed at his soul, a sound that made him realize he was not dreaming. He was in hell. At first, Eleb thought it was his imagination, but then he felt it. Heat that scorched his skin, fire that never consumed but tortured. He looked down and saw flames licking at his feet, yet he did not burn away. The pain was endless. He said every nerve in his body was alive with agony, yet there was no relief, no escape. But then he saw faces. People he had known, people who had once walked the earth, twisted in agony. Some were silent, their mouths open wide but unable to scream. Others clawed at their skin, begging for mercy. One man cried out, "Just one more chance, please," but no answer came. Demonic creatures slithered in the shadows, grotesque beings with eyes like burning coals. They mocked. They tore at the people, but the worst torment was the hopelessness. Eleb realized something terrifying. He could remember every sin he had ever committed, every cruel word, every selfish act, every time he had mocked God. It played before him like a cruel movie. He said the weight of his guilt crushed him more than the flames did. But then, he whispered when he told me later, I heard footsteps behind me. He turned, and a darkness deeper than the rest began to move. He could not make out its shape, but he felt its power. It was coming for him. He wanted to run, but his legs would not move. He said it was as if the ground itself was pulling him down. The screams grew louder, almost cheering that another soul had joined them. That was when I realized, he said, tears streaming down his face as he told me later, I was not alone. Something had followed me. The creature stepped closer, and he could hear its voice like gravel grinding. You are mine. Eleb said terror, unlike anything he had ever felt, gripped him. He had laughed at God, rejected him, mocked his people. Now he knew it was all real. He tried to call out, but the weight of despair crushed his chest. And just when he thought it was over, when the hands of that creature reached him, something unexpected happened.
Eleb told me that in that moment, when the demonic hand reached for him, he was certain he was finished. The weight of despair had crushed every ounce of hope. He said it was like drowning with no surface in sight. But then, piercing through the thick darkness, a light appeared. At first it was faint, like a single star in a pitch-black sky, but it grew brighter and brighter until it pushed the shadows back. The demons shrieked and retreated, covering their faces as though they could not stand it. The voice that had said, "You are mine," faded into a desperate growl. Eleb said he fell to his knees, blinded by the brilliance. Then, through the fire and screams, he heard a voice, calm, steady, filled with authority and mercy all at once. Your time has not yet come. Go back and tell them hell is real. The words thundered inside him, yet they carried peace. He said he felt both exposed and embraced. His life flashed before his eyes, the wasted years, the mocking laughter, the pride that kept him from believing. He thought of me, of our children, of how many times he had brushed off faith as nonsense, and he wept. Then, as suddenly as he had fallen, he felt himself rising. The heat was gone, the cries faded, the darkness lifted. Back in the hospital room, I watched in shock as the flat line on the monitor flickered. The paramedics shouted, rushing back to work on him. And then, against all odds, my husband gasped for air. I stumbled backward, covering my mouth as his chest rose and fell again. "Stay with us," one paramedic said, astonished. "We have a pulse." I ran to his side, holding his trembling hand. His eyes opened slowly, filled with a fear I had never seen before. When he whispered my name, it sounded like a cry and a prayer. For days, Eleb barely spoke, but when he finally did, his voice cracked as he told me everything he had seen. The darkness, the flames, the screams, the demonic presence, and finally, the light. He said over and over, "Deborah, it is real. Hell is real." God gave me a second chance, and I cannot waste it. From that day forward, my husband was not the same. The man who used to mock prayer became the one who led us in it. The man who rolled his eyes at church became the one urging us to go. He wept often, not out of weakness, but out of awe for the mercy that had pulled him out of eternal torment. And I changed too. His testimony shook me to my core. I realized how shallow my faith had been, how often I had played church without surrendering my whole heart. I fell on my knees in our bedroom one night, tears soaking the carpet, and I told God, "Take everything. Take my pride, my bitterness, my doubts. I do not want a Sunday faith. I want a surrendered life." Our marriage healed in ways I never thought possible. Forgiveness replaced resentment. Conversations replaced silence. Hope replaced despair. We began to share his testimony everywhere, in our church, in small groups, even with strangers, because how could we keep silent after what he had seen? Today, I can say this with conviction. Hell is real, heaven is real, and eternity is too long to be wrong. To those who are watching, I need you to hear this. Do not wait until death comes knocking before you take eternity seriously. Eleb saw the torment. He felt the flames. He heard the screams. But God gave him mercy, a mercy that many will never have if they die unprepared. To the believer who is lukewarm, remember this: God is not far. He is calling you deeper. And to the one who is living in sin, this is your chance to turn back. You may not get another warning. Eleb often repeats one line now, and it has become a quote etched in my heart. One breath on earth can decide where you spend forever. Friends, I pray you take this seriously. Before I end this story, I want to ask you, what would you do if today was your last day on earth? Do you know for sure where you will spend eternity? Drop your thoughts and reactions in the comments. I would love to read them. And please, do not forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us take this urgent message to more souls who need to know the truth. This is not just my husband's testimony. This is a wake-up call for all of us.